Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So I know this video is going up a day late. I was trying to film it on Sunday. Today is currently Monday, and I just didn't have time, and I didn't want to rush this video because I really want to talk about this book today. But before I get into that, I know I mentioned in my last video that I'm going to be doing a giveaway on a full Twisted Retreat box. This is the May 2023 box. It does feature Sallow Bend by Alan Baxter. If you haven't seen my May 2023 Twisted Retreat unboxing, go take a look at that because I have a full box for y'all. And I will be putting all of the info on that up on Wednesday. So this video is going up on Tuesday, so tomorrow on my Instagram. And it'll be really simple. Just follow me at Prynne. I'll probably have you like tag a friend or two and then answer like a horror book question. Due to shipping restrictions, it is only going to be open to people in the US. Hoping one day I'll be able to change that for my giveaways, but I pay for all of this stuff, so that's like what I can afford, and shipping overseas is really expensive right now, especially for a box this big, so I'm very sorry about that, but it is open only to residents of the US at the moment, or at least people who are currently located there with an address. And I know I said this in my last video, and all of my videos, but please, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. I'm really trying to get to 4,000 subscribers. That would be awesome. And thank you guys so much for watching and all that you guys have done to get me where I am today. I am so happy with this channel, and that is all because of y'all. So thank you very much. Now, without further ado, let's talk about The Haunting of Alejandra by Castro. So if you guys saw my, my May Nightworms unboxing, my May 2023 Nightworms unboxing, you probably already have an idea of what I thought going into this novel. I wasn't the biggest fan of the last book that Nightworm sent us by Castro, which was Goddess of Filth. I did read it. It was much shorter than this one, but I wasn't blown away by it. One of my biggest issues with that novel is I feel like Castro's definition of feminism is very different than mine, and we don't quite see eye to eye on things, and I feel like she writes a lot of female leads that do not super great things and aren't super great people, and are never held accountable for it. And that was a big issue that I had with the main character in Goddess of Filth, and unfortunately became a big issue that I had with The Haunting of Alejandra. So I'm going to read the inside flap really quickly because I also kind of want to dissect that compared to what the actual novel is about. So it says, a woman is haunted by the Mexican folk demon La Llorona in this ravishing and provocative literary horror novel about motherhood, family legacy, and self-discovery. Alejandra no longer knows who she is. To her husband, she is a wife, and to her children, a mother. To her own adoptive mother, she is a daughter. But they cannot see who Alejandra has become, a woman struggling with a darkness that threatens to consume her. Nor can they see what Alejandra sees. In times of despair, a ghostly vision appears to her, the apparition of a crying woman in a ragged white gown. When Alejandra visits a therapist, she begins exploring her family's history, starting with the biological mother she never knew. As she goes deeper into the lives of the women in her family, she learns that heartbreak and tragedy are not the only things she has in common with her ancestors. Because the crying woman was with them too, she is La Llorona, the vengeful and murderous mother of Mexican legend, and she will not leave until Alejandra follows her mother, her grandmother, and all the women who came before her into the darkness. But Alejandra has inherited more than just pain. She has inherited the strength and the courage of her foremothers, and she will have to summon everything they have given her to banish La Llorona forever. Okay, so minor spoiler alert, so like skip like 15 seconds ahead if you don't want to hear this, but I think it's very important to say this for people going into this book. This is not about La Llorona. This La Llorona creature, not La Llorona. And that was a huge disappointment for me because I really wanted to see that folklore really built up upon, and instead Castro kind of uses the name and ideology behind that folk story to kind of create her own mythology around something different. So it is definitely very misleading, and therefore I was very disappointed in that, because what made me really want to read this novel is playing up that aspect. So I'm just going to leave that part at that. The other thing that I think is interesting, and this was a major, major, major issue for me throughout this entire novel, is where it says here, Alejandra has inherited more than just pain. A lot of this novel takes the idea of a woman not needing to have accountability for her own actions and choices and just kind of throws it away as, well, she inherited this curse. She inherited this legacy. This is what she was dealt in life. But it's not. A lot of the tragedy that affects Alejandra and her ancestors, a lot of the hardships come from their own choices and their inability to speak up for themselves. And I don't like how this book kind of writes off their inability to empower themselves as something that is like a curse put upon them. And what I mean by that is one of the major plot points of this story is that Alejandra is unhappy with her marriage. Something that you see throughout her family line are other women in her ancestry who are also unhappy with their marriage. What all of these women consistently seem to have in common is that they married their husbands for the wrong reasons. They marry them for their looks, they marry them for their careers, they marry them for their success, they marry them for stability. None of these women ever seem to marry their husbands for love. And then as they get older and the marriage starts to crumble, they're too scared to leave their husbands because of the stability that has been provided to them. And yet in no point in this novel do they ever, any of these women ever say, I married my husband for the wrong reason and I regret it. They continue to blame and vilify the husband. And I found that just really strange, because maybe one of these characters having that mindset, I would be like, okay, that's like a character flaw that this character has, and obviously our main character Alejandra does. But to then repeat it over and over and over again throughout her ancestry kind of creates this false image that these women are marrying these men solely out of obligation or need, which maybe in like the 50s and the 1800s I can understand that more, but we're talking about a woman in 2023 where that really isn't the thing. There's a whole scene where Alejandra is talking about how she's given up her passions to be a mom, and she regrets being a mom, and she regrets having a third child, even though she loves the child now that it's in existence. Like, she didn't want the third child, she just let it happen, but she never once expresses any of this to anybody. She just keeps it inside of herself and continues to pretty much mourn the fact that life isn't working out for her, but she's not proactively doing anything. Like, she instantly gives up her career to just be a housewife and then is like, well, I'm bored all the time and I feel exhausted because all I do is work with the children. But she never really says anything to her husband to ask him for help. She never has an adult conversation. She kind of has the mentality of like a 14-year-old girl thinking that she's owed everything and that everybody around her can read her mind. And I found that just very, very aggravating. And the book really tries to paint her husband as this awful guy, and then you read what he's doing, and the book does a lot of telling instead of showing. But the book shows very much that he's not a bad guy. And then we'll have Alejandra just tell us how inconsiderate it is, and it's like, but how? Like, you're not communicating with him, and he's just he's following through with the guidelines that when they got married, they set up together. So he doesn't see it as wrong. And it was just very hard for me to read about a woman who can't take accountability for her own actions, but also can't stand up for herself, and is looking at motherhood as this kind of curse. And she's raising these very unrealistic children. The reason I say unrealistic children is just because the way these kids talk, kids in their age group don't talk like that. Another thing that I found very, very odd about this novel is, and this stems from both the children as well as other main characters, people tend to just figure out these really complicated supernatural events like that. It's like, for them, it's like 2 + 2 = 4. It's like, so this and this and this happened. This weird, obscure supernatural entity must be the answer. And we have that with Alejandra's mother, Alejandra's therapist, Alejandra's eldest daughter. There are so many scenes where, like, all of a sudden they're just like, oh, like this weird, bizarre, supernatural, inexplicable thing must have happened. I know exactly the answer. And it's like, I don't really believe a 10-year-old girl, let alone a therapist and a doctor, would just instantly gravitate towards the correct solution to a supernatural entity. It just felt so unrealistic. And just impossible. Like, those context clues, I don't think anybody, except for these characters in this book who have had it magically thrust upon them, will be able to figure this stuff out. It just felt so forced. And just like an easy way for V. Castro to continue to push her plot forward without doing any kind of, like, exploration into who these characters were and how they would be able to figure these answers out. It just kind of happens magically. Trigger warning, there is suicide pretty heavily in this novel. But it's kind of lauded, which I didn't like. And I don't like the idea of a therapist kind of condoning suicide as a proper course of action to rid yourself of something. And I'm going to leave it very, very vague, but know that that is in there and that it sent a very wrong message to me. And then the resolution that comes from that was extremely unrealistic and, like, contrived, and I really hated it. Before I continue to just hate on this novel, I'm gonna say that the body horror in this book is there. It's disgusting, and it's almost entirely menstrual related, which to me was really gross to read about. That's just like a type of body horror that I find very just, there's a lot of blood. There's a lot of blood, and it's kind of gross in like like almost a too realistic kind of way, while at the same time being very, very supernatural and over the top. It was just icky. Like, I know I shouldn't be saying stuff like that's gross, but the way it was written in this book, it was really gross. So there is body horror there. It's not the type of, I don't particularly like body horror there, but it's also not the type of body horror I'm used to reading in horror novels, so beware of that. But the description of this La Llorona character I thought was awesome. So freaking creepy. I don't understand the supernatural physics behind the character. It's really weird, and it kind of morphs to fit the scenario, so there's not a lot of consistency with that character. The visuals, awesome. Visuals are so creepy and so detailed and so well done. Very horrific. Really, really love that. However, the two other largest issues that I had with this novel were the overall writing style, which I've kind of touched upon, where there's a lot of telling, very minimal showing, not a lot of explanation of how we get to point A to point B, a lot of just making sure the reader is told so much that it's like, we can't be led to deduce anything. Like, we are being forced to have V. Castro's opinion on the scenario and aren't given the ability to actually create our own implications, our own interpretations. And then the writing itself is just kind of bad in general. There's a line, I wrote it down, on page 245 of this novel, and I just thought it was some of the worst, one of the worst written lines I've ever read in a book. But the line is, "But the woman he fell in love with was no more. That was the same woman who fell in love with him. You can't love a ghost." The redundancy in that, I read that and I was just like, did she just say the exact same thing in 3 different ways? Boom, boom, boom. Like, that is how much telling is in this book. She can't just say what's going on. She has to overly explain it multiple times in as many ways as possible, so you cannot deduce anything but exactly what she is trying to say. And there's no room at all for, like, any kind of interpretation, even if you disagree with what's happening. Like, I don't think certain characters should have come to certain conclusions in this novel, but because we have been told 3 times that these are the conclusions these characters definitely made, it's like, alright, I don't know how they made it, I don't know how that was even possible, but I guess that's what's happening. So that happened a lot. To be perfectly honest, this book was really hard for me to get through. This is the first book I started reading of the month, and I ended up having to read 2 palate cleanser books and 1 novella in between being able to finish it because it was such a drag to get through. Part of the reason that was this book dragged because, again, there's so much telling going on. There's so many unlikable characters going on. But on top of all of that, the main story has like 8 different side stories that come out of it. We get the past of Alejandra's mother, her grandmother, and like 4 of her great-great ancestors. One towards the very, very end during the Mexican Revolution, I believe, that is so long. It's like 50 pages long, I want to say, about characters that we haven't heard of at all up until that point, and then don't hear about pretty much at all afterwards, just to kind of put this like weird historical scene in the book. Like, it could have been its own short story, and this was the best example of, like, I think V. Castro just having these ideas and wanting to throw them into this book somehow about, like, Mexican ancestry, but it never really came back to relate to what was happening. Sure, these characters are kind of haunted by this La Llorona figure, and sure, they all have to have, like, similar personalities and similar struggles that Alejandra is having, which all in the end come back and, like, help Alejandra figure out what's going on. I understand that, but I don't need 50 pages, 20 to 50 pages per minor ancestral character to tell me that. Reference it. Give me 4 pages, you know? Have a character reading a book about it. Like, I don't need all these new characters introduced just to kind of push them in to the situation. Just to kind of show that these characters consistently made the same mistakes Alejandra did, and none of them were ever held accountable for it. This book isn't scary, even though the image of La Llorona is really scary. This book isn't scary. This book is a really long metaphor for postpartum depression. It's a really, really long metaphor. And I think that's something that's important to talk about. I think it could have been executed better. I think it could have been explained better. I don't think it stuck the landing. I think the metaphor started off strong, and then it really just fully disengaged what it was trying to do. And I don't know. At the end of the day, this was a 2-star rating for me. Not a 1-star. I've read worse. But I don't like V. Castro. I don't like her writing style. I don't tend to agree with her opinions. I really think that her characters are never held accountable simply because they have main character syndrome. I don't think her novels are necessarily scary. And I would really like to see her characters held accountable for some of the nastier actions that they take. I really wanted to like this novel. I went into it thinking I didn't like this author, seeing the premise and being like, ooh, this could be really, really cool, because I would love to see a Mexican author talking about Mexican folklore. However, the vast majority of this book is set in, I think, Massachusetts. There's definitely some scenes in Texas, but it would have been really cool to have, like, a lot set, you know, in Mexico, really focus on the original folk story that inspired this concept, and maybe somehow really tie up the loose ends for this metaphor for postpartum depression that V. Castro started out with, because I really think she got lost along the way, and it just didn't work for me. Her characters are very stagnant. They have no change. They have no development, really. She's assuming her readers are dumb and just shoving down our throats what opinions we should be pulling from the novel. Even though certain things I think could have been left up for interpretation, she tells you you can't interpret what she is writing. So, I don't know. I wasn't a fan. 2 stars. This is really, really hard for me to get through. Like, I think I'm going to make it to 6 novels, or I think I'm going to make it to 6 books this month, but it was really close. The good news is that I read Christopher Triana's latest novel right afterwards, and I devoured this in like 2 days. I have a lot to say about this, so this will be my next review, but definitely disappointed with this. I don't think I'm gonna ever read V. Castro again. I just don't like her style of writing, and I don't like the tone that she carries, and I don't like how she assumes that her readers need to be told everything. So, there you have it. 2 stars. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays. And if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you on the next one. Mwah.